Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Hello there, it's Cathy Mazak, and today I'm coming to you to talk about how you are too precious for a mediocre career. After we've been in a professorship for a while, and this could be, through tenure, through the first promotion, it could even just be a few years into the professorship or a few years into a new professorship, like a new job, maybe you switched, some things will start to happen. And I'm going to use some of my favorite metaphors that if you've listened to the podcast for a while, or if you follow my videos, then you might recognize these. So one of the things that happens is the snowball rolling down the hill. So the snowball rolling down the hill is, this metaphor is meant, like you're meant to picture how like this snowball is rolling down a hill and on the way it's picking up like branches and dirt and rocks and all these kinds of things, so that something that was kind of a small, little, compact, beautiful snowball at the top of the hill, once it rolls down, it's picked up all this stuff, and then you can kind of I picture like this cartoon version of that, right? You can picture the snowball with like a pine tree sticking out the side and like maybe a broken pair of skis and like rocks and dirt and everything rolling down the hill, and it feels like it's getting faster and faster. And it's not what it was at the start. And what's happened is you've picked up along the way all of these things that you didn't really intend to pick up, so that your career or your professorship or your job feels like, instead of what you want it to feel like, it feels like this load you're carrying of extra crap around, right? Like too many things. The things don't belong together, just too much, and rolling too fast, right? Because as that snowball rolls down the hill, it picks up speed, right? So that's something that can happen as the longer you're in your professor work. Another thing that can happen is that because you are reliable, and because you are very, very smart, and because you are likable, you will be offered admin positions, leadership positions. These admin positions might not be, actually, most of the time they're not, compensated, right, in any way. It's more like, oh, you are now the director of our grad program. What that means is more emails, but not additional compensation or support necessarily, right? So more workload, but not more support. And as you take on these kind of little, I'll say like there's a couple versions of this, right? Like there's the smaller leadership roles, such as the one I just mentioned, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm going to be the program lead, or I'm going to be the director of our master's program, or I'm going to, these kind of smaller committee work types of leadership roles or admin roles. They really are admin roles, but they don't have salary with them. They may or may not have course release. More and more, they don't have course release time with them. Or you might even, because again, you are likable and you are friendly and you're smart, and at least to others, you appear organized, right? Even if you don't feel very organized yourself, you might also be recruited for a department directorship or an associate director or associate dean or some other thing, a leadership in a center or an institute or something like that. And when you take on those positions, because you feel like you have to, you feel like nobody else can do it but me. You feel like they asked me, so that maybe you're even like a little bit flattered, right? Like they asked me, so I'll do it. What you end up doing is like constantly putting out fires. And I would say kind of like constantly putting out other people's fires. But what I really mean is like constantly putting out fires that it's not like, this is not advancing your happiness to put out these fires, right? So you're constantly like solving problems, a lot of times, right? Solving problems for other people, solving problems in that role. And it's a lot. And what happens is because you're putting out fires, you feel like you don't ever get to your own work, like the juicy, I really want to work on these projects and things. If my job was only this, I would be so happy. I want a sabbatical so I can work on this thing. That work, you're not getting to because you're putting out other people's fires. And then a last thing, and there's many more, but I'm just going to hit 3 today. You feel like there's something more for you. Like there's something bigger or more that your career could be, but you're so bogged down in the everyday that you can't like even maybe picture it, but you have this like feeling that there's got to be something more than this. Like I worked so hard to get here and I'm not happy. There must be something else, but you're not sure what it is. And also there's definitely that added, like, who am I to complain? I have a tenure-track job and my work is stable and all of that stuff. Those other stories that we tell ourselves to justify why we shouldn't complain about a mediocre career. Let me just be honest. I'm going to use these words and they're going to bite a little bit, but that's because I want you to see what's possible for you because you are too precious for a mediocre career. If you relate kind of to any of those 3 scenarios that I just, laid out for you, like not to be alarmist, but if you don't make a change, then what waits for you is more and more years of the same. Okay, so unless you actively, intentionally decide to change your career, then what waits for you in the next 20 years, 30 years, 15 years is putting out other people's fires, more feeling like the snowball has collected too much stuff and is rolling too fast, more feeling like I never get to my own stuff. There's something else more out there for me. I'm so exhausted. I can't even think about what that might be, but I know it's not this. You can keep doing that for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Sadly, right? And I think many professors do. And that's okay. Like if that's what you want, then that's fine. But I have a feeling if you're here listening to this, that's not what you want because you are too precious for mediocrity. And what you will have, the sum of all of the fires you put out, the sum of all of the things you pick up as your snowball rolls down the hill, will be a career that is meh. And that you enjoyed sometimes, but not more than 50% of the time. Again, not good enough for you. Wasn't good enough for me. Not good enough for you. You are meant for more. So I want to talk today about what that more, or maybe it's not even more, maybe it's other, right? Maybe it's less, right? What a career that is more magical will look like and how you can create it. Because the only person who can create it is you. In fact, changing jobs won't create it. Taking a sabbatical won't create it. The only person who can create a magical career that is about what you want is you. But it's going to take some meta work. It's going to take some work thinking big picture. It's going to take some work planning. It's going to take some work envisioning and dreaming and thinking. And you need some time and some space to be able to do that work. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. All right. I also just want to say, you spend most of your time at work and sleeping, right? Like those are most of the things that you do. That's why your job can't just be meh. It has to be better than that. It has to be like, not every day are we saying that you're going to like get up like raring to go, because we're humans. But the overall feeling of the career should not be, I'm surviving it. It should be, I'm loving it, or at least I'm liking it, right? It should not feel like a survival. It shouldn't feel like the Hunger Games to live your career, because you're spending too much time on the career for it to feel that way all the time. Okay, that's why I'm always asking you, like, what do you want your career to feel like? Because once you know that, then you can create it, because your actions can then create it. All right. So how do you go from mediocre to magical in your career? How do you go there? I am going to give you an example of a wonderful and lovely and very precious to me client. Her name is Becky Dawson. Hi, Becky. I hope you're listening. And I hope it's okay to tell your story once again. And it's updated. This is updated Becky Dawson's story. Becky was on our podcast in the summer of 2020. I did a lot of interviews for the podcast, and I interviewed a lot of different people, some of them colleagues, some of them former clients or current clients, and Becky was there. So you can go back to the 2020 podcasts and find her interview, or just Google it, like Becky Dawson, Cathy Mazak podcast or something, and it will very likely come up. So I'm going to tell you her story because the ending is super magical. And of course, it's not over. It's in process. Becky signed up in 2019. In the fall of 2019 was when we first started talking about our Elevate program. And that's when we did research with I don't want to tell this virtual room full of researchers that I did research. But I conducted about 50 interviews with mid-career academics about what was it about mid-career that was hard, that was sticky, that they needed help with. And based on those 50 interviews, we created the Elevate program. Really, Gina and I pretty much created it. So Becky was one of the people I interviewed. She ended up signing up for the program. When we were filling the program in 2019, the program started, I think, at the end of January in 2020 or February 2020. As you can imagine, the world came unhinged and the pandemic started soon after that. So it was really an interesting, to put it very positively, time to be in the Elevate program, because Becky Dawson is an epidemiologist in public health. And so she came into our program. She works at a smaller college in a kind of rural area. And her position, it also included, besides teaching undergrads, she also taught or was involved with the training of clinicians in the local hospital. And so, especially around research. So she was juggling like a bunch of different hats and a lot of service. And she came into our program with those problems, right? I'm doing too much service. I'm working these kind of I have these multiple roles. She was also, I think she was like posted cross department. Like there was a lot of this we get this like all the time in our programs, where we have people who are like straddling different fields a little bit, or at least different departments or roles, have a lot on their plates. And they come into our programs, and especially Elevate, like looking to say like, okay, how can I figure this out and get back to and make sure that I'm doing what I really want to do for my career, right? So that's why she came into the program. But of course, what happened, she's an epidemiologist, she got thrust into the spotlight very quickly. She became the authority on her campus about COVID-19, the authority in her community about COVID-19. She started a newsletter. She started a Facebook group where she would talk to people and answer their questions every day. She got featured and then became a regular on her local news channel about COVID and about the pandemic. And all of these things kind of were this perfect storm of her as she was in the 6 months of the Elevate program, which ran then from like February 2020 to July 2020. She was thinking about like she had come into the program thinking like, how am I going to reduce my service load? She had a sabbatical coming up. How am I going to use my sabbatical? How am I going to like really craft my role to be what I want it to be? And then this whole other thing happened with COVID that put her in this very public scholarship role. And because she's an epidemiologist in public health, like that was appealing to her. Like that's the kind of role she wanted. That's the kind of impact that writing academic articles isn't necessarily going to give you, right? It's like how can I impact the everyday health of communities very directly? And she was doing that work. She started an email newsletter that she still writes. Again, the Facebook group, local TV spot, all of these things, right? She was doing the thing. She was doing the public scholarship. So during Elevate, Becky got really clear on the impact that she wanted her work to have in the world. And that's because as she was negotiating and figuring out all of these things that were happening to her, in Elevate, she had this protected space. She had one-on-one coaching, and she had group coaching, and she had training, right, which is the 3 elements of the Elevate program, so that we were holding space for her in the program to work through these things, to get the clarity that she needed. And by the end of the 6-month program, she really kind of had maybe not a perfectly clear picture of what she wanted her career to be, but a much clearer picture. And it was very different than she would have imagined coming into the program because of so many things that happened. But in the program, she had this space to really think and figure out and get clarity. So she was able to like envision like exactly what a career, like what she wanted her career to look like, including how her time would be spent, how she would get paid. Okay, also thinking about how am I getting compensated for all of this public scholarship that I'm doing, and the kind of products like written things that she would create that would make an impact. And because she was working in this container of Elevate, where we're asking you to think intentionally, and we're asking you to be like very reflective and thoughtful, and we're building your self-trust and self-knowing muscles, she was able to really see like, okay, this thing is what I want for my career. She had it kind of pictured. And then for the last 3 years, because that was 2020, for the last 3 years, she's been in our alumni programs and things like that. She has been working to bring that vision to life. And I want to note here, 3 years. It is both a long time and also a short time. If you think about your career being a 30-year career, 3 years is actually the timeline of that is a very kind of feels to me like a kind of regular timeline for a major project in academia, right? That like if you did a major research project, it would take that long to like get funded, get data, get results, get them published. Similarly, Becky was able to transform her career entirely in 3 years by continuing her thoughtfulness, by having cast that vision in Elevate and then implementing on that vision, taking intentional action to make her career what she wanted it to be. And for her, what that meant was a shift from my currency is peer-reviewed articles to my currency is public scholarship. She got a regular spot on the local news. And now she doesn't just talk about COVID, she talks about public health more largely, and a little bit like science and health more largely. Because she has that position, she gets to like suggest stories to the TV news channel. So she's impacting with her message so many more people very, very directly. And that is what she wanted. And she was able to make that kind of pivot in her career to public scholarship. So in August, she came to our retreat. She came to our writing retreat here in Puerto Rico. And we got to catch up, which was so wonderful. And during the retreat, what she worked on, rather like, you know, a lot of people come and they're working on their book or they're working on their articles and stuff. She worked on resting, thinking, getting her year together, her, you know, projecting out, getting herself ready for the next academic year. And she worked on this last piece of the puzzle that she felt like she needed to fit in. So her hospital training work that she did, she felt like she needed to revise her compensation in that area. And she had been nervous about reaching out and asking to have her compensation package revised, which so many of us have been in that position, right? We're like, oh, we need to ask, but we're kind of afraid. And so the way she describes it to me was that like, that's the last piece of the puzzle that I need to kind of figure out is the compensation part. Because she already had down a complete pivot in her scholarly impact. She has learned how to put up boundaries and how to like shape her time and how to create a day that feels fulfilling and spacious. She learned all of that. She implemented all of it. And so by the time that last piece of the kind of the salary and the compensation review got clicked into place, which happened at the retreat, she is able to now say, after 3 years since she's been in Elevate, that she has created this aligned career. She cast the vision in 2020, and now in 2023 is able to live in that alignment. Having a week that feels like the way she wants it to feel, having her work have the impact that she wants to have. And we recently had like a follow-up call from the retreat, and she was like, is this okay? Because this feels like maybe I should be striving for something else or doing something else. And I was like, or maybe you should just sit in the fact that you wanted something and created it. Like, how amazingly magical is that? So I tell this story, and Becky, thank you so much for, for your story and for sharing it with me. I want to kind of reflect on what she really did that is transferable to you, listener. So she took 3 years of intentional action. Okay. And what I mean by that is she kind of relentlessly pursued the clarity of the vision of what kind of career she wanted. Emphasis on wanted. Not the kind of career that she saw somebody else have. The career that she wanted for herself. She relentlessly pursued that for 3 years through intentional action. So in Elevate, she was able to kind of dream what she wanted. And then for the next 3 years, she's able to take intentional action and steps to create that through boundary setting, through time management, through understanding what her zone of genius is, and being like, again, like relentless about creating her days so that she's in her zone of genius. She had to also have tons of courage, like so much courage to say, you know what I want is an impactful career in public scholarship. And that means I'm going to have to let my peer-reviewed publication pipeline go in favor of this very impactful public scholarship work that I'm doing. And that takes so much courage, right? She also really needed to develop self-trust and self-knowing. And these are two things we talk about in Elevate a lot. The self-trust piece is kind of what I prefer to talk about when other people talk about mentoring. So I'm kind of in the line of thinking of Tara Moore in the book Playing Big, where you need to work on listening to your inner mentor. In fact, this is why our program has one-on-one coaching in it and group coaching in it, because what coaching is, when it's done well, is helping you understand yourself better. It's not consulting. Consulting is, where I tell you what to do. And that's not what coaching is. As a coach, my job is to help you understand what you want to do. It's very different, right? Like, because I can tell you all day what to do and it will not work for you because you need to understand what you want to do. And a key component of that is that you trust yourself. So when you have an idea about how you might want to change something or something you might want to pursue, you can navigate the voices in your head that say, no, but nobody's ever done it that way before. Oh, but what's this person going to say if you do it like that? Like, you can navigate those voices and get to your inner mentor and listen to her. And Becky really worked on that. Like that's something you have to work on. Also, we work on in Elevate, and I know that Becky worked on self-knowing, which is a little different from self-trust. So self-knowing is like the things are definitely related. Self-knowing is understanding the processes that work for you. And instead of trying to take on somebody else's processes, refining the processes that work for you. Most people who we get into our programs, and especially people in Elevate, you're like very accomplished people. You didn't like get here by accident. You didn't get here by doing things that didn't work. What you mostly want is, I want to be successful and I want it to be less stressful than it is right now. So that doesn't mean you should just take on somebody else's processes and ways of doing something. You should take your processes and ways of doing something and refine them so that they work better for you. Okay? So that's the self-knowing part, is really saying, what works for me? What am I motivated by? What do I need to do more of? How do I tweak it to make it work better for me? Okay? So to recap, to make the kind of change that Becky made, you need to relentlessly pursue the clarity of your vision. That means you do not rest until you figured out what you want. You need to take intentional action. So that intentional action is something that you continue to do throughout your career. So intentional action towards that vision, right? In order to take intentional action, you need to develop self-trust and self-knowing. So that's the self-trust. I'm going to listen to my inner voice and I'm going to trust her. And self-knowing is, I have the tools, I have the processes. They need understanding and tweaking. They don't need overhaul. And that is the formula for living in alignment, like our dear Becky Dawson. And who knows, like she might sit this semester feeling like everything's great, and then something else happens and she decides to take a different, decides to go in a different direction, or she decides to take on a new project. But I wanted to talk about this as like a real example, like a real life example of what's possible when you invest in yourself and when you invest in doing this work of clarifying vision, intentional action, self-trust, self-knowing, and with a nice dash of courage, because it takes a lot of courage to trust yourself and to know yourself, to get to the bottom of knowing yourself. So I'm going to circle back now to end this podcast and video. I'm going to circle back to the question I asked at the very beginning of the Mid-Career Magic series. And that question is, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want a career that is mediocre? Do you want a career that you survive? Do you want a career that is meh? Sub-question, how long will you put up with those things? Are you willing to put up with that for 10 years? Are you willing to put up with that for 20 years? Are you willing to take meh? Are you willing to take stress and overwork and putting out fires? Does that sound good can you survive another year with that? Do you want to do that for 10 more years? Because the path to the magical career, the path to alignment, starts with self-reflection, clarity of vision, intentional action, self-knowing, self-trust. It starts with these things. And so giving yourself permission to take the time to ask yourself, what do I want? What is my vision? How am I going to get there? To work on self-trust and self-knowledge and intentional action. Those things take time. They take an investment of time and energy and potentially money as well. I'm going to be honest with you. Because this is not work that is easy to do. Because the results of this work are not typical results, right? They're extraordinary results. This is the work that will get you the extraordinary career. And it's the only work that can get you the extraordinary career. Nobody else can give it to you. Nobody else is fighting for your career like you are. So it is time. Now is the time. You do not have any more moments of meh left in you. You're not for that. You're too precious. You're too precious for a mediocre career. Now is the time to take action and make change in your career. If you would like to do that with my support, then I am telling you today, please apply for our Elevate program. We are running one last cohort. And then in my business, which I've talked about before on the podcast and stuff, I am pivoting and simplifying to navigate and writing and publishing only. And Elevate is really about your career. It's about bigger than just writing and publishing. It's about all these things. It's about creating the career and thus maybe the life that you want for yourself. And so if you want to do that work with me because you've been listening to this podcast for a while, or you read my book and you're like, yeah, I'm on the Cathy Mazak train. Like when she talks, I get what she's saying. It feels good to me. She's like, I'm in values alignment with her. Then please apply for Elevate now. I'm going to give you a little bit of logistical information here. And then this is the last that you will hear me publicly talk about Elevate because we will be sunsetting the program. And this is our last cohort. So application process, you apply. And I also just want to say as a sidebar, if you are not mid-career, but these things that I'm talking about appeal to you, I actually want you to apply. Even though on the application, it asks you what your career stage is, just put other and apply. And this is because we have had non-tenure, like we've had people in Elevate who have submitted their tenure documents, but haven't gotten promoted yet. So they're in that in between. And also we have had people who are still technically early, maybe not early career, like not maybe the first 2 years or 3 years, but year 4, year 5, where you're getting ready to go up for tenure. If any of these things sound like you, then apply. And don't worry, like if it's right for you, then I will pass you to the next step in the application process, which is a pre-enrollment call with me. We'll talk about it. And if it's right, then yes. And if it's wrong for you, then no. Like it's really like you need to apply because I need to filter the people who can get on my calendar. And I can see a good fit application. So even if you're not solidly mid-career yet, I encourage you, like if these things I'm talking about today resonate with you, I encourage you to apply. So then the other things you need to know, there's a document that's linked up in the description of this video or in the podcast show notes that explain what the program is about, what the curriculum is, how it is delivered, and how much it costs, and all the dates of all the meetings so that you can plan. You can be like, oh, well, I'm not free on Tuesdays, so I can't do it. You know, like you need to be free to participate. And so you can go and read all of that. That might affect your decision to apply. Enrollment closes October 6th. We start October 24th. Okay. So there's a little wiggle room in there as we get ready. That's what we're closing the doors on October 6th. And then there's some time to get ready before we start October 24th. I want to talk to you. So if any of this sounds appealing, and if you're thinking about joining us for this last cohort of Elevate, please apply. It is the only way to get one-on-one coaching with me, which is included in this program. I'm the lead coach on this program. So if you're interested in working directly with me, unlike in Navigate, where in our Navigate program, our very talented coach, Gina Robinson, is the head coach. So most of the coaching that happens in Navigate is done by Gina, and most of the coaching that happens in Elevate will be done by me for this last final round. I've enjoyed talking to you today. I hope that something I said inspires you to take that time to think big picture about your career, to believe that you don't have to accept mediocre. In fact, you are way too precious for mediocre. You can create magic in your career. You can. I have watched people do it. People like you have done it. If you want to feel better in your career, if you want it to live up to what you truly deserve, then I would consider taking our Elevate program and accepting my help, walking side by side with you as you create the career you really want. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.